On his 18th birthday, Vancouver native Ryan Knighton was diagnosed with a disease that would change his life forever. It's called retinitis pigmentosa, a progressive condition marked at first by tunnel vision and eventually by a total loss of eyesight. Knighton decided to chronicle his journey into blindness. His book is called Cockeyed.
Thanks for coming out to the book launch. I'm just going to read a really short little piece from the beginning, but I'm not actually going to read it. I'm going to pretend I'm reading it. But I'm actually reciting it, and I've learned after other readings to look like I'm reading so people won't think it's a really bad dramatic monologue. I suppose in a way the book is an accidental memoir, and I'm also an accidental writer. I didn't mean to be one, and I had no interest in being one, actually. I mean, when I was a student in high school, I was really less than mediocre student. I wasn't very engaged in school. I always liked books, but I didn't read very much.
Knighton teaches contemporary literature and creative writing at Capilano College on the North Shore of Vancouver.
This is a community college. It's been here since the 60s. And some of the first writers that I was really fond of actually taught here. Sharon Thiessen and George Stanley. So how did the papers go?
Fantastic.
Fantastic? Better than my other class. They were like, morning writing works better for you? Like, as in you wrote it this morning? Cockeyed is really two stories at once. It's a coming-of-age story about a kind of working-class kid growing up in a small town in British Columbia and kind of the usual perils of being a kid growing up. But the other story that happens at the same time is it's about an 18-year-old kid also trying to learn how to become a disabled man, and how those two stories are kind of at odds with one another.
American journalist and author Jim Knipfel also suffers from retinitis pigmentosa. His book Slackjaw was an inspiration for Knighton.
I was very happy to see it because so many books about the blind or written by the blind are maudlin and overly poetic. Ryan's was straightforward and it was funny. He told a lot of very true stories about the kinds of things the blind have to deal with on a daily basis.
Am I clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Comedy's really closely related to tragedy. Like they're joined at the hip somewhere. Oops, I'm not clear. And usually the comedy comes very naturally in places where we find discomfort. And when you're going blind like I did over 15 years, you live in a kind of twilight world for a long time where you're not quite a sighted person and you're not quite a blind person. So that incongruity just becomes inevitably slapstick, where you're trying to either pass yourself off as one or the other. Is the door open?
Yeah.
Do people just leave?
Yeah.
Author Brian Fawcett has been a longtime supporter.
At one level, it's a slapstick. You know, it's the places where he ends up between two urinals, you know. And Ryan's got a real eye for slapstick, and he always has had. But, you know, I mean, it works because it's beautifully written, right? And because you're dealing with a guy who's utterly unsentimental about a condition that nearly everyone doesn't look at straight, as it were. And he does. You know? It's like, okay, I'm blind, now what?
Oops.
We followed Knighton to a concert by one of his musical heroes, Billy Bragg.
Well, here we are again. Another Friday night in Vancouver. We've had a great time travelling across Canada. Walking in the park, kissing in the dark.
Billy Bragg is part of that soundtrack of my teen years. Little did I know that music would become part of learning my own blindness, because I started going to the nightclubs when I was about 18, when I was underage, 17. And those nightclubs were the place where I could bash around and slam into people and be as blind as I was, and nobody really noticed because it just fit in. It just was like everybody else, only I wasn't as drunk as them.
Earlier that day, Knighton got to attend the sound check.
Say, Ryan, what do you want me to play, mate? Anything you'd like me to play?
I was a minor. Between the wars. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, I can do that. These are the skies so dark with moments.
It struck me when I was finishing the book that I had to address the fact that I'd written about a person, that is myself, who was not only going blind but was disappearing. That is, I haven't seen my own face in about 7 years now. I mean, I can see little tiny slivers of it, but nothing I can hold together really as a face. And I can't see how I've aged. I can't see what time is doing to me, like how it's writing itself on me. And it feels really unnatural not to know what you look like as you grow into your final character. And writing seems to me as a kind of antidote to that, because I'm trying to get the stories down and the pictures down that I can still remember before they disappear on me, because as I go further into the blindness, as my sight disappears, I'm losing more and more visual memory too. Best thing I ever did was take touch typing. I took it in grade 9 instead of doing metal work. And I took it because I thought it would be easier than welding stuff. And again, I had no plans to be a writer, but it's the best thing I ever did. I'm so glad. I'd be so screwed if I didn't have touch typing.
Please welcome to the stage Ryan Knighton and Don McKellar.
In Toronto, Knighton was a guest at the International Festival of Authors.
I wore my glasses just to confuse you all.
He really is blind, by the way.
I just wanted to see if they'd help, and they don't. The response has been really positive, and I'm surprised, because I was expecting the primary readership would be people who knew other people who've gone blind or whatnot, but a lot of people are picking it up, just understanding that it's going to be a good read.
Filmmaker Don McKellar read the first draft of Knighton's memoir.
I really found it was fascinating. It was a really unusual book of this kind, and because of the humor and because of the genuine insights, but also particularly because of the lack of self-pity.
I'm very fickle about language now, because I realize that the words people use around me illuminate the world in my mind, and so I crave language that's really particular to the world and will kind of give it to me in the way I'd want to see it. So I'm an avid worshiper of the sentence now. It's my surrogate sight now.